Good afternoon, everyone. I hereby call this meeting of the Washington Metro Rail Safety Commission to order. This meeting is being recorded as well as streamed live for the public. Ms. Silbaugh, do we have a quorum today?
Yes, we do, Chair Hart. Participating in the meeting today are yourself as Chair, Secretary Treasurer Farrar Dyke, and Commissioners Rouse and Conklin.
Thank you, Ms. Silbaugh. Now we will turn to our safety message from Mr. Braxton. Mr. Braxton, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Hart. Although fall brings along bursts of color, fall leaves can result in dangerous conditions for those driving on roads and highways. When leaves pile up on the road and get wet, they cause the road to get slippery. This worsens when the temperatures drop and the wet leaves freeze over. Aside from the slip factor, piles of leaves cover the painted roads, making it difficult to spot lane markers, potholes, and speed bumps. Reducing your speed when driving on leaf-covered roads, ensuring more distance than usual when coming to a stop behind other vehicles, and giving your full attention to the road while driving will help avoid accidents. On Metro Rail, too, fall leaves temporarily affect train operations similarly to highways. Fall leaves lessen the adhesion conditions on the tracks. To counter this, Metro Rail institutes medium speed restrictions on part of the system that are prone to the fall leaf accumulation. As part of the WMSC's oversight activity, we monitor this seasonal adjustment to train speeds, confirming that train operators, controllers, and other affected Metro Rail personnel have the knowledge and training to conduct their work within this temporary adjustment to train speeds. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Braxton. We will now move on to the minutes from our last meeting. Secretary Treasurer Farrar Dyke, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. The minutes of the September 17th, 2024 meeting were posted for review. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? I move approval of the September 17th minutes as circulated. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Rouse has seconded the motion. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say yay.
Yay.
Any opposed, please raise your hand and say nay.
Chair, the vote is for yays and no nays, and therefore the minutes are adopted as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Silbaugh. We provide an opportunity for public comments at each of our meetings, so that's the next item on our agenda. To ensure that we recognize all who wish to speak, we provided an opportunity for those who have joined the Zoom meeting to sign up in the chat box. If you wish to speak but did not sign in, please do so now. I would also remind everyone, including those of you watching on YouTube, that you can always report any concerns, any safety concerns through our website, wmsc.gov, through our social media channels or by email. Ms. Minor, do we have anyone who has indicated that they would like to speak today?
No, Chair Hart, there are no names in the chat.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Minor. We will now continue with the next agenda item, which is my remarks. Our meeting today includes updates on the WMSC's ongoing safety oversight activities and the actions that we take on a daily basis to help ensure that Metro Rail upholds its safety commitments and strives to continuously improve the safety of its system. I appreciate the ongoing communication and coordination that the WMSC staff conducts with Metro Rail at all levels of both organizations. This includes the ongoing work related to audits and corrective action plans, safety certification, and inspections. Later in this meeting, we will discuss updates on other oversight activities, including those related to audits, inspections, investigations, and oversight of Metro's safety certification. Commissioners will also review and vote on two resolutions. The first is the resolution to transmit the WMSC's draft fiscal year 2026 work program and budget to our jurisdictional funding partners. And the second is an interim revision to the WMSC's program standard that incorporates the approved risk-based inspection program that is mandated by the Federal Transit Administration. Dr. Meyer, do you have any opening remarks today?
Yes, thank you, Chair Hart. I have updates on several areas of our ongoing oversight work.
Over the course of this past summer, I reported on the Federal Transit Administration's audit of the WMSC's Safety Oversight Program implementation. On September 20th, we received the final report from the Federal Transit Administration of their audit, which contained one finding. The finding seeks clarification on entries in our corrective action plan tracking log, and over the next few weeks, we'll prepare a corrective action plan to resolve that finding. Perhaps it goes without saying, but I'm very pleased with the results of this audit. During our public meetings and on our website, we provide information for sending Metro Rail related safety concerns to the WMSC so that we can receive those concerns. And we receive them from passengers, the general public, and as well as current and former Metro Rail employees. The WMSC independently reviews each safety concern, and if it's within our oversight role, we investigate. In September, we received a safety concern regarding commingling of used and new parts during the installation of brake calipers on the 7000 series rail cars, as Metro Rail conducts its scheduled maintenance program of the entire 7000 series. The WMSC conducted inspections at Brentwood Yard to assess the safety concern, and WMATA's Inspector General contacted the WMSC regarding a similar concern received by the OIG team. After independently reviewing information and conducting several visits to Brentwood Yard, where this work is being performed, the WMSC concluded that there was no immediate safety concern. However, as a result of work done by both the WMSC and the WMATA Inspector General, Metro Rail is currently revising relevant program and procedural and instructional materials governing the replacement and installation of brake calipers on 7000 series rail cars. And it was an opportunity to continue our working relationship with the Inspector General. Changing topics, the WMSC continues its efforts to find a solution that aligns with our authorities for the subpoena that we issued on April 8th to compel WMATA's compliance with our audit of Metro Rail's fitness for duty and occupational health programs. In September and earlier this month, the WMSC team sent follow-up document requests concerning the records produced for the fitness for duty and drug and alcohol areas of the audit. WMATA responded to all but one of these requests, and both organizations' counsel continue to discuss the one outstanding follow-up matter. Our attorneys have also continued their discussion related to the initial document requests about Metro Rail's occupational health programs. Metro Rail stands by its refusal to provide any documents for this audit related to the occupational health of its workers. The WMSC provided a written guidance document for WMATA's review, and WMATA provided feedback. However, this did not lead to a solution and of the continuing dispute about the scope of the WMSC's authority. Worker safety and occupational health are identified in WMATA's Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, and the WMSC is obligated to oversee the safety elements in WMATA's Agency Safety Plan. Therefore, we will continue to assess and take the necessary steps so that this audit work can move forward. Moving to another topic, our program standard says that if Metro Rail fails to comply with any provision of the program standard, the WMSC may issue a notice of non-compliance. We have issued 4 such notices since August. The notice we issued in August pertained to a corrective action plan that the WMSC approved in January 2022 for equipping the operating compartments of trains with inward and outward facing audio and image recording devices by early 2027. Mr. Raddick will provide an update on this later in the meeting. We issued 3 additional notices of noncompliance earlier this month. The first of these pertains to a cap that arose from a 2021 audit finding that WMATA did not have any load ratings for its bridges and aerial structures. Although some progress has been made, WMATA has fallen behind on its schedule. There are still 84 elevated structures that lack load ratings. The remaining 2 notices of noncompliance pertain to 2 other corrective action plans required by recent audits. Metro Rail refuses to develop both caps, stating they are intertwined with the subpoena issued for responses to initial document requests for the Fitness for Duty and Occupational Health Program audit. Later in today's meeting, Mr. Raddick will provide more information about these notices of noncompliance. Each of the notices contains a description of the safety issue and what Metro Rail must do to return to compliance. All of the notices of noncompliance have been posted on our website, wmsc.gov, under official actions. The commissioners will recall that we've had many discussions about Metro Rail's roadway worker protection program. One of the key concerns has been that the pace of rule changes has negatively affected WMATA's ability to maintain a safe and mature RWP program. On September 27th, the WMSC issued an order requiring that Metro Rail maintain its RWP program as it was written and implemented as of October 1st. Thereafter, Metro Rail may propose an annual schedule by which it intends to revise the RWP program and provide the WMSC with a package of revisions and accompanying training materials for WMSC approval. The intended goal here is to create an annual, predictable revision cycle with exceptions to address safety risks meeting certain conditions and for changes resulting from WMSC required caps. Complying with the order will allow Metro Rail to focus on ensuring that employees are properly trained on rules that remain stable and for Metro to assess compliance for a reasonable duration before additional changes take place. On October 11th, Metro Rail submitted a petition for reconsideration of the RWP order to me, as provided in the WMSC's program standard, section 11. In my role as CEO, I will respond to this petition for reconsideration no later than this Friday, October 25th. Switching to another topic, the WMSC at every level continues to dedicate significant time, attention, and resources to conducting our in-depth review of the safety certification work surrounding Metro Rail's efforts to activate automatic train operation, or ATO. One such activity earlier this month was a workshop attended by WMSC staff and the Metro Rail project team. The workshop dedicated time to reviewing the work thus far, and it provided another opportunity to review key areas of focus for the WMSC and to come to a common understanding of the next steps in the project. Paul Smith will discuss details concerning our work on overseeing the activation of ATO later in this meeting. So thank you. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Dr. Meyer?
Chair Hart, Commissioner Conklin has raised his hand.
Yes, please, Commissioner Conklin.
Not so much a question, just a statement that, I am troubled by the sort of non-compliance notices and further lack of cooperation on some of these audits. The work of the commission be much more effective if we're able to do that work with Metro Rail's direct cooperation. And I would hope that Metro Rail staff and management would see value from the output of these endeavors in providing a safer environment for both the public and the workers. So I remain hopeful that we can find a path to resolution around the subpoena, and also that compliance can be restored in some of these other areas. So I just wanted to note that publicly. Thank you.
Thank you for making that point, Commissioner Conklin, and I agree with you completely and look forward to next steps in that direction.
And Chair
Any
Hart.
other questions?
Oh, sorry, yes, Chair Hart, Commissioner Rouse also has raised his hand.
Yes, Commissioner Rouse, please.
Yes, thank you. And I'll probably just dovetail off that point there. I think the big issue here and question I have is, do we have clear communication as to why some of these issues are not being resolved, especially the corrective action plans? Is there specific reasoning? And maybe we'll get into that in the detail later, but as it relates to RWP, for example, we know there's issues there. We've wanted fixes. Do we know what their long-term goals are in terms of getting there? Have they conveyed that to us? Is there any issue in terms of being on the same page as to where they need to be versus where they are, versus us just seeing snippets of changes and wondering where on earth they're going? And to your point, probably just confusing the matter in terms of activities today versus what people have done in the past and where they want to go. Do you have a good feeling in staff in terms of where they're headed and what their ultimate objectives are for some of these issues?
In a word, no, we don't. And we have been observing at the Rules Committee, the RSSC, for some time, and we have seen quite a quantity of rules come to and all be passed by that committee. But we are not in the strategic oversight role that I'd like us to be in, or the role that I'd like us to play. And that very much played into our thinking as we issued this order, which places us in a higher level position of approval of a predictable revision cycle, and it forces, I hope, both Metro and the WMSC to think strategically about the changes that Metro appropriately wants to make to its RWP program.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I think if we know the ultimate goal, it might help us rather than having to handle everything as it comes in at face value. And with some of the other caps, if there is a issue or miscommunication in terms of priorities, or they're having trouble one way, it would be helpful to know what those are so we can better align our priorities in terms of expectations and getting some of these things closed.
My genuine hope is that this order will allow us both to operate at a more strategic level and with respect to a program that I think there is general agreement between Metro and the WMSC needs to be adjusted and changed. It's a matter of ensuring that those changes are strategic and thoughtful, and that they don't outpace the organization's ability to produce the materials and conduct the training that's necessary to safely execute the RWP program. I see Commissioner Conklin has raised his hand.
Yeah, just a follow on that. I'm assuming that there's a lot of communication about wanting to see this sort of direction before we would issue the order. And I'm just wondering if you could maybe summarize the type of interaction we had to suggest that we wanted to see a more systematic approach to these changes rather than one-off changes as they occur in each meeting of that committee.
Sure, we meet regularly to talk with Metro Rail staff at all levels, and have also recently conducted a roadway worker protection audit where a great deal of information was exchanged. But I might ask, with your permission, Ms. Samara Singha to speak more to the staff level communications leading up to the audit, leading up to the order.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer, and Commissioner Conklin. The array of interactions between the WMSC staff working on roadway worker protection and Metro Rail's team working on roadway worker protection spans about 2 years. And in that time, and more closer into the issuance of the order, our team has been attending the Rail Safety Standards Committee to observe the deliberations and voting of the various rule changes pertaining to the roadway worker protection program. And at those meetings, either prior to or following those meetings, our WMSC staff have interacted with the various individuals who runs that committee, as well as others, to hear their concerns as well as share ours. And then we have on many occasions followed those verbal interactions with communications on the changes that are intended or had been approved by the Rail Safety Standards Committee and the Roadway Worker Protection Program changes as a whole. And more closer in to the issuance of the order, there were several interactions where the WMSC was requested to meet with Metro Rail. Metro Rail requested a meeting where we further try to understand the strategic direction on these changes. And following, as you heard from Dr. Meyer, the lack of understanding on the strategic path, that is what prompted us to issue the order, the WMSC order on roadway worker protection. On the day of the order issuance, I personally spoke with the Chief Safety and Readiness Officer for WMATA Metro Rail and provided her the elements of the WMSC order as we were planning to issue it, received several questions from her specifically on the order, as well as other activities surrounding the issuance of the order, gathered that information and responded back to her on the questions she had raised, and then we issued the order. So that, in a nutshell, is our interactions on the kind of the progression until we issued the order on the 27th of September.
Thanks. I appreciate that because like I mentioned before, I just think it's helpful when we can make improvements in a voluntary way based on information exchange rather than through directives and orders. So, but thank you for sharing that background. I think it's helpful to know that there was a lot of dialogue leading up to the issuance of the order.
Thank all of you. Thank you for those good questions and the answers, Dr. Meyer and Ms. Samar Singha. Are there any questions from the commissioners on this subject? Any further questions?
I see no further hands, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Silba. In that case, we'll now move on to our next agenda item, which is audits with an update from Mr. John O'Donnell. Mr. O'Donnell?
Yes, thank you, Chair Hart. The WMSC is in the midst of conducting our second triennial cycle of audits, which are aimed at examining Metrorail's compliance with its Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan and associated commitments and requirements. As Dr. Meyer stated, the WMSC has not yet initiated the Fitness for Duty and Occupational Health Programs audit. Counsel from each side continue to discuss the requests made for that audit, and the information has not yet been provided. Once the documents are all collected and reviewed, the WMSC audit team is ready to begin the Fitness for Duty and Occupational Health Programs audit. And as with all audits, we will conduct interviews and on-site observations and coordinate those activities with Metrorail. Shifting topics to our active audits, we've concluded the interview and observation phase of our Emergency Management and Life Safety Programs audit and held an exit conference to discuss the findings from the audit on October 16th. During the exit conference, we provided Metro with positive practices showing continuous improvements, along with 6 preliminary audit findings. The findings are considered preliminary at this point, and Metro has until tomorrow, the 23rd of October, to provide additional information for the WMSC to review prior to finalizing those findings. Switching to our other active audit on October 16th, we held the entrance conference with Metrorail for our next audit, the Control Center and Rail Operations audit. In the entrance conference, we outlined the scope of the audit timeline, and the planned interviews and observations. Throughout September and into October, we reviewed documentation provided for the audit from Metrorail and have now moved into the interview phase of the audit. Throughout the remainder of October and into November, we will conduct interviews of personnel and also conduct observations of Metrorail activities related to the control center and rail operations. Looking forward in the future, our next audit that is not yet started, we are now in the planning stages for the elevators and escalators audit. In November, in accordance with our audit schedule, we will be sending the notification letter and initial request to Metrorail. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Mr. O'Donnell?
Sorry, couldn't seem to activate myself there. I don't see any hands from the commissioners, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Silba. We will now, in that case, we will now take up the next agenda item, which is corrective action plans. Mr. Raddick?
Thank you, Chair Hart. Metrorail currently has 88 open caps and has other caps in development. Corrective action plans in development are those related to the roadway worker protection audit. The WMSC reviewed the initial set and provided feedback to Metrorail, and new revisions are due back from Metro on October 30th. The caps in development, once approved by the WMSC, will be added to the list of open caps that Metrorail works to implement lasting safety improvements for. As part of Metrorail regular weekly submissions, it has submitted 36 new deliverables associated with open corrective action plans for WMSC review. And I will first provide an update on our notices of noncompliance, and we'll conclude with caps that have closed since our last public meeting. Since our last public meeting, we have issued 3 notices of noncompliance to Metrorail related to corrective action plans. On October 15th, we issued a notice of noncompliance for cap C72. As part of the 2021 audit of elevated structures, inspection, maintenance, and repair, the WMSC identified that Metrorail does not have basic load ratings for its elevated structures to confirm the number or type of trains or size of equipment that can safely traverse the bridges or stations, which creates a risk that, among other risks, the structures could be inadvertently overloaded or delay in determining whether a structure is safe for train traffic if an inspector identifies a potential concern. Load ratings are an industry standard. As a result of identifying Metro Rail's lack of load ratings in the 2021 elevated structures audit, the WMSC required the implementation of Corrective Action Plan C-72, which is now over a year behind the approved and agreed upon schedule. Metro Rail now expects this effort will require another 10 months to complete, projected to conclude in May 2025. Load ratings are basic engineering information that Metro Rail should have. This deficiency is of particular relevance because Metro Rail is contemplating speed increases for its trains. Vehicle speed is a direct factor in determining the dynamic load placed on an aerial structure. Consequently, to safely increase maximum vehicle speed, it is necessary to know the load rating of all structures over which trains travel. As stated in the Notice of Noncompliance, for Metro Rail to return to compliance with C-72, it must complete all elevated structures load ratings as required by this cap. Metro Rail should direct whatever additional resources are required by relevant teams involved to ensure this effort is completed expeditiously. Shifting to our next new Notice of Noncompliance, on October 18th, we issued a Notice of Noncompliance for C-255. As part of the 2024 WMSC audit of Metro Rail's Automatic Train Control, or ATC, and Signals program, the WMSC found that Metro Rail is putting its personnel at risk due to health hazards such as damaged and repositioned materials marked as containing asbestos that are not being identified and managed as required by its agency safety plan. Metro Rail drafted a corrective action plan for C-255 on February 20th, 2024 as required. The CAP development process was progressing as required by Program Standard Section 9C, and a new revision of this draft cap was expected to be provided by Metro Rail by April 19th of this year. However, on April 18th, Metro Rail informed the WMSC that a cap would not be provided to address this finding. Since April, the WMSC has not received any revised cap as required. This also means that Metro Rail is not implementing necessary safety improvements that were identified by this finding. As stated in the Notice of Noncompliance, for Metro Rail to return to compliance for C-255, Metro Rail must follow all processes regarding WMSC corrective action plans as outlined in Program Standard Section 9C. Moving to the last new Notice of Noncompliance, on October 18th, we issued a Notice of Noncompliance for C-272. As part of the 2024 WMSC audit of Metro Rail's Revenue Vehicles, or Railcar program, the WMSC found that Metro Rail is putting its personnel at risk by not meeting its life safety and occupational safety and health requirements in railcar maintenance facilities. The major issues identified by this finding and for which C-272 must address include not complying with its Hot Works program related to metal grinding, improper NFPA signage, issues with required fall protection in place around repair pits. Personnel have differing understandings of the personal protective equipment and safety practices required during lifting operations, and hazards related to grease control and compressed gas, and finally, issues with eye wash stations that were past due for cartridge replacement. Program Standard Section 9C3A states that Metro Rail has 30 days from the date the WMSC issues a finding or recommendation to propose a suitable cap. The report and findings were issued on May 21st, 2024, and therefore the draft cap for C-272 was due no later than June 20th, 2024. However, on June 20th, Metro Rail informed the WMSC that a cap would not be provided to address this finding. As stated in the Notice of Noncompliance, for Metro Rail to return to compliance for C-272, Metro Rail must follow all processes regarding WMSC corrective action plans as outlined in Program Standard Section 9C. The last update on notices of noncompliance is related to C-146, which was issued in August. This was discussed at the September 17th public meeting, and today I will provide an update. As discussed at our last public meeting, the WMSC received a project plan on September 9th to address this CAP's finding that Metro Rail rail cars do not include inward and outward facing audio and image recorders in all operating compartments. Metro Rail's project plan shows that as the main objective of this cap, the completion of camera and audio recording equipment testing, procurement, and installation for all 6,000 series and 7,000 series rail cars will not be completed until September 2028. This was to be completed by July 2026. On September 19th, the WMSC met with Metrorail to gain an understanding of this timeline. Metrorail cited limited shop space and resources. However, the key schedule driver was Metrorail's decision to upgrade only one train set at a time. More information, including a possible modification request, is expected in November. Metrorail is aware of the WMSC's stated concern about this project's delay. We hope that any modification request addresses that concern. All 4 notices of noncompliance discussed today can be found at our website, wmsc.gov/oversight/official actions. Now moving to the 6 corrective action plans that have closed since our last public meeting. These include C59, C151, C232, C235, C236, and C248. In contrast with the just discussed notices of noncompliance, each of these closed caps are success stories representing safety improvements made by Metrorail due to the WMSC's oversight. C59 was developed based on a finding from our 2020 Rail Operations Control Center audit. The finding stated Metrorail has failed to regularly update the Rail Operations Control Center Procedures Manual. To address this finding, Metrorail updated more than 180 procedures, training materials, and processes. Staff then needed retraining on any procedures applicable to them. Metrorail is continuing to monitor this through their local and departmental safety committees. Moving to our next closed cap, C151 was developed based on a finding from our 2021 high voltage and traction power audit. The findings stated that Metrorail was not documenting, tracking, and conducting all preventative maintenance inspections that are required by WMATA policies, manuals, and instructions. To address this finding, Metrorail needed to update its preventative maintenance instruction development and review process itself, and then identified instructions that required update or development as a result of that. The record-keeping system also needed to be updated to reflect these updates. Metrorail then implemented the new process and instructions and provided the WMSC with 18 months worth of implementation records. Moving to our next closed cap, C232 was developed based on a finding from the 2022 track and structures audit. The finding stated that WMATA does not have a weed spraying program consistent with industry standards. To address this finding, Metrorail track and structures personnel became certified to spray herbicide and began spraying and cutting vegetation. Metrorail initially envisioned this as a contract award. However, when Metrorail encountered challenges with acquiring a suitable contractor, Metro started performing this work with their own personnel. We appreciate Metro, especially track and structures personnel's flexibility and commitment to keep this cap moving and ultimately implementing the necessary safety improvement. The next closed cap we will discuss is 235, which is a cap from our 2022 internal safety review audit. This cap resulted from a finding that Metrorail did not have a process to incorporate their internal findings from internal safety reviews into the Metrorail-wide safety management system. To address this issue, Metrorail created a process for incorporation of internal safety review findings into their electronic safety management system via the use of a risk management software, and provided 12 months of records as evidence to show this process was in place. Next up is the closure of cap C236. This was also from the 2022 internal safety review audit. And this finding, it stated that Metrorail has not yet implemented training requirements in system safety, hazard management, and SMS training for personnel responsible for internal safety reviews as required by the WMSC program standard. To address this finding, Metrorail updated requirements in its Public Transportation Agency safety plan, along with the training matrix for personnel involved in internal safety reviews to include this training requirement. All 22 relevant personnel have either completed or are in the process towards completion of the necessary training courses. Our final closed cap since the last public meeting is C248. 248 resulted from our 2023 rail maintenance machines audit. The recommendation which led to this cap identified the lack of a process at Metrorail for the decommissioning of rail maintenance machine equipment that is no longer in use at Metro. To address this issue, Metrorail created a process for the decommissioning and disposal of both rail maintenance machines as well as rail vehicles, including the use of interdepartmental committees, ensuring relevant groups are involved in decisions made regarding equipment decommissioning. As I mentioned, these 6 closed caps are all success stories that show what WMSC and WMATA collaboration can achieve. More to come in future meetings. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Raddick, for that very comprehensive presentation, and it's always great to hear about success stories. That's a huge win-win. Thank you for that. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Mr. Raddick?
Yes, Chair Hart, Commissioner Conklin has his hand raised.
Yes, Commissioner Conklin.
Yeah, on the load rating notice of non-compliance, is that load rating just purely based on the design characteristics of these structures, or does it account for their age and potential deterioration, current state of maintenance? 'Cause, you know, some are brand new, some are very old.
Right. It's supposed to be the latter. So you start with the design and then you work up to the most recent inspection reports, which would give the actual condition of the structure. And that's supposed to be all factored into the load rating.
So it's not just merely a question of finding the approved design documents. There's some other work that has to be factored in. I was just curious. Right. It was just a record keeping issue if there was analysis required for that. And then I mean, obviously it's good that we have all these closed caps and progress on those measures. So my question came up before you went through those, but since I'm speaking, I guess I have to speak to that as well.
Thank you. And Chair Hart, Commissioner Rouse also has his hand raised.
Thank you. Commissioner Rouse, please.
Yeah, I'll have to try to not make this a parallel comment as to Commissioner Conklin's because it was very similar. But have we heard anything specific on cap 72, I think was load rating, as to why it's still taking them time? Is it a matter of, to Commissioner Conklin's point, is it more than just records? Is it the level of analysis that they need and they just don't have the resources? Or is it a priority issue where maybe it's priority for safety, but for engineering, we'll get to it when we can, and that's why it's taking so long? Do we have any feeling as to what's taking them to get to this closed cap?
It's primarily a resource issue. They're not devoting the resources necessary to get the job done.
Okay, so hopefully this is just a reminder to get that done. And I want to say it's low hanging fruit because, as we just pointed out, if you're asking for more than do the designs meet the design criteria and how does that relate to the vehicles, there's more than just getting here it's a Cooper E60, right? It's some other level of analysis that you've asked for, so they need to do a little bit of legwork, but getting the resources to just get this closed and moved on so we don't have questions out there would be helpful.
So I have a quick question. I'm curious, well, actually 2 questions. One is, does the determination of the load rating, does it require any invasive investigation, or is it all done on external appearance and paperwork?
It is generally done on paperwork, but there could be circumstances, and we don't know the details for each structure, that they might need to do some testing, but it's generally based on the inspection report, the most recent condition assessment, essentially, and the design documents if they have them. Okay, thank you. And my last question is there any time dependency? Does any of this depend on just time deterioration, and does it need to be redone periodically, or how does that work? As the condition of the structure changes, this is something Metro will have to live with and adjust the load ratings accordingly. And the variation in the structure and how it changes would depend on whether they need to do a new load rating assessment. But that's for the engineers to decide.
And conversely, of course, the different load ratings that are calculated is something that Metro will be able to take into account as it prioritizes maintenance or rehabilitation work. So I'm just wondering, do cracks develop from vibration or from water freezing and all those kinds of things that might make it time dependent? And certainly that can and does happen, and Metro's regular inspection program, which we audited when we did our structures audit, is calculated, as any such inspection program should be. It's calculated to determine that kind of cracking, that kind of degradation, that kind of damage, and then bump that up against an existing load rating to determine whether or not any rehabilitation work is needed, any relook, a new load rating might be needed, or any other kinds of weight or load adjustments that might be necessary to the structure.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Meyer, and thank you, Mr. Raddick. Are there any other questions from the commissioners for Mr. Raddick?
I don't see any other hands.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Silva. We will now move on to our next agenda item, which is an update on some of the WMSC's latest activities overseeing Metro Rail's safety certification process. Paul Smith, WMSC Director of Systems Engineering, will present this item. Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Chair Hart. The underlying philosophy of the safety certification program at Metro Rail is to comprehensively identify hazards and evaluate the probability and severity of each hazard and to mitigate those hazards based on Metro Rail's safety risk assessment methodology. Safety certification is performed during the design, construction, testing, and commissioning of a project to prevent these hazards from resulting in safety events affecting Metro Rail employees, passengers, equipment, systems, and infrastructure when the project is placed into revenue operation. Metro Rail has a safety certification program plan which applies to all eligible projects. This plan describes the requirements of the safety certification program. The WMSC's program standard describes the oversight WMSC implements to verify that Metro Rail is adhering to its obligations for safety certification of various projects. Similar to our other program areas, we maintain overall situational awareness of the health of the Metro Rail Safety Certification Program by routinely observing WMATA's Safety Certification Review Committee actions, observing the functioning of multidisciplinary Metro Rail working groups assigned for various projects undergoing safety certification, and by regularly discussing inconsistencies and deviations with the project personnel, as well as the safety certification team within Metro Rail's Safety and Readiness Department. In addition to this overall awareness of the health of the Metro Rail Safety Certification Program, the WMSC also designates projects for in-depth review. This process is applied to projects that present heightened safety concerns or require additional oversight to ensure all safety certification requirements are met. Once a designation is communicated to Metro Rail, a project designated for WMSC's in-depth review cannot be placed into revenue operation by Metro Rail until the WMSC has concurred that Metro Rail has completed the safety certification requirement of that project. Once designated for in-depth review by the WMSC, the entire WMSC organization, to include the WMSC commissioners, the WMSC senior leadership, WMSC experts, and other WMSC oversight personnel, devote a significant work effort reviewing project documents, test procedures, results of tests completed, reviewing training programs for impacted personnel, and conducting field observations of various tests and exercises to confirm operational readiness. We use the data and inputs from our inspections, investigations, corrective action plans, and audits to take a comprehensive approach to the safety certification oversight. Currently, we have designated 4 projects for in-depth review: the 8000 series rail cars, the activation of automatic train operation, the return to design speeds, and the automated wayside inspection system. WMSC attended an ATO workshop on October 11th, where Metro Rail and the WMSC teams discussed key issues awaiting resolution prior to the activation of ATO. These issues that the WMSC raised are related to the use of automated train supervision, also known as performance levels, to reduce train speeds to comply with the operational rule that states trains are not allowed to operate above 59 miles per hour, except for certain sections of the Green Line that currently operate at 65 miles an hour. The automated train supervision system is a non-vital system and thus not fail-safe. Given that this system will not fail safe, the WMSC has explained that this system should not be relied upon for train speed regulation. During this workshop, the WMSC also addressed 2 other areas of concern on the return to design speed project, which is linked to the activation of ATO. Metro Rail intends on changing the maximum authorized speed for certain sections of the rail system to 75 miles per hour. These 2 areas of concern are the safe braking distance of rail cars and the load ratings of aerial structures. As you heard earlier in the meeting, these load ratings are the subject of CAP C0072, for which the WMSC has issued a notice of noncompliance to WMATA. Also, as part of WMSC's in-depth review of the activation of the ATO project, the WMSC observed a demonstration of tested failure conditions of the ATO system to understand the interactions between various components involved in the operation of the ATO system overnight during non-revenue hours on October 15th. On October 16th and 17th, the WMSC also observed a classroom ATO pilot training activity, as well as a designated training scenario for rail vehicle operators conducted in a simulator environment. The WMSC reviewed draft safety certification package as well. It was submitted last month, and we've provided our comments back to Metro Rail and received their feedback on our comments. The WMSC team continues to observe dedicated multidisciplinary safety certification working groups for all these projects. And as always, the WMSC remains receptive to listening and providing any requested feedback on Metro Rail's implementation modes. And I, along with other WMSC team, regularly communicate directly with the Metro Rail senior management and project managers, as well as the safety certification managers on any safety certification inconsistencies. Thank you, Chair Hart. That completes this presentation.
Sir, you're muted.
Chair Hart, you appear to still be muted.
It's out. There, is that better?
Yes.
It's a human factors issue, clearly. So thank you for those questions. Any further questions for
Yes,
Mr. Smith?
Commissioner Rouse has raised his hand.
Okay, please.
Thanks. And this may be a question that needs a little research, so please don't feel like you need to answer this one on the spot, but I think it's important as it relates to the ATO discussion and speeds. Do we know, are the speeds you're talking about in terms of the operating speeds that they currently limit the train sets to today, is that what the ATP system is enforcing in terms of what it has, or is that directly related to the timetable MAS or design speed? What do we actually have in front of us? Because I don't know that we need to be on the same page as to what we're talking about. It can get really messy with ATC really quickly because
Commissioner Rouse, are you asking about the current manual operation of the system and ATP settings now, or are you asking about a future state under ATO?
So current state of operations, I don't know that they ever went back and changed the track circuits to enforce a lower speed. So, typically you get your maximum authorized speed is the highest code you get for older systems. And so it's up to the engineer to then operate to whatever the appropriate MAS is for that section of track, because you just don't have enough codes to consider every single MAS in different sections of the railroad. So just to be clear, and again, I don't need an answer right now. It'd be very helpful to get back and understand when we have more discussions about design speed and ATO, what we have as the state of operations today. There is an operational limit. It was like 59 or something like that. But that I thought was more of imposed. It wasn't design. It wasn't MAS from the timetable perspective. And I don't know that it was necessarily enforced from the track circuit perspective unless they went back and changed all the track circuits. And so it would be helpful to get a picture there in terms of, what's the operational speed today? What's that based on? Is that based on an operational restriction because of, issues they had with older train sets, which is usually the case? Is it the actual design MAS of the railroad itself, which I don't think it is? Or, is it actually what the ATC limit is? Is that what the track circuit limits were changed to for one reason or another at some point, or always that way? That would be helpful to have some ground understanding of where we're going with this in terms of more detailed discussions about ATO and especially design speed changes, because it seems like we're getting a lot on that, and I just want to make sure we're all baselined as to what the current state is for not only operational rules, and operational restrictions imposed on the train sets, but what the train control system is enforcing and what the actual design and timetable speeds are. And I don't, like I said, it's a lot to unpack there, so I don't want you to try to necessarily answer that on the fly, but
Okay.
it's important moving forward.
Yeah, we can definitely do our homework on that and come back to that.
I do think it would be appropriate, though, if Paul Smith can give any particular background, if you want to now, given your involvement in the project.
Yeah, so I mean, just to speak about the track circuits themselves, no adjustments have been made to the track circuits when they went out of ATO operations. So whatever was there when the system basically opened and still remains today. So in the areas where track circuits were set to 75 miles an hour, even when those speed adjustments were put into the rule book, they never changed any of those track circuits to match that operational rule. So the only kind of way that the operators are operating today is by rule. They have an operational rule that says they can only go 59 miles an hour, and they're supposed to adjust their train speed to match that. Even if ATP says you can go 75, they're not allowed to operate at that higher speed. So it's the matter of the operator in manual mode making that adjustment to comply with the rule.
Yeah. No, that's why I want to be careful here, because ATC systems are a little bit, that's always been a challenge with them, right? I don't want to give the impression that they were as capable of modern systems today, where you can have, if it's 71, it's 71. If the next mile track's 73, it's 73. You can enforce specific speeds based on precise locations. That's not the way these older systems work. And in many cases, they were a backdrop to the engineers operating with the operating rules that they had in place. And so, like you said, the high end would be MAS. Well, if for that section of track, you had to know it was 59, not 74, right? It was as fast as you could go. And so you had to operate at that speed rather than what it would allow you to. These older systems are a little bit, I think people perceive them to be more like what we have today or what they might see in other places with advanced systems, and it's just not. And so there's some work there to do to get to ATO the way we expect it and protect it, and usually it comes in the form of limiting your operational capacity, right? So if you want to enforce 65 instead of 74 for a given section of track because that's the design speed for that section, then you have to use a lower code, and maybe that's 60. So you have to eat 5 miles an hour just to be absolutely sure you're safe. So I don't want to pull everybody into that level of discussion right here, but it will be important moving forward as we have more discussions about ATO and design speeds to be on the same page as to what we're talking about for what maximum speed is, right? And Paul, very, very well. So I just wanted to, when you were talking, I was like, we need to maybe have some discussion on this before we jump too far down the rabbit hole.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Rouse.
So I have a question for you, Mr. Smith, and that is, you mentioned something about non-vital systems and the relationship to being fail-safe. Could you say a word about that?
Yes, and as in relates to the ATS system, as was written in the 1996 Shady Grove accident report, they were relying on the ATS system to perform a vital function, and the NTSB wrote that system should be not utilized in that capacity to regulate the train speed. So that's kind of what we were talking about there, Chair Hart. Is there any? Oh, I apologize too. I may have just used the acronym ATS when that means the Automatic Train Supervision System. So just to be clear on what system we're talking about, that's what we were speaking about in that particular section of the that I was speaking about.
And you may have used the term performance levels, which is quasi synonymous with ATS.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer.
Mr. Smith, it may be helpful for you to back up a little bit and describe vital versus non-vital and how those play into this decision framework, because I'm not entirely clear on that. I have what I think I know, but I don't actually know.
Yeah, so the vitality of the system would mean that if there's a failure of that system, it always would fail in a safe manner. In this instance, ATS does not fail in a safe manner. It can fail in a non-safe condition. Thus allowing, in the Shady Grove accident, for instance, it was allowed the train to go a faster speed than what it was actually supposed to be going in that instance.
So is that an issue of best engineering practices, or is it a regulatory matter, or where does that come from?
I think it was a design decision from the initial design. I'm not sure if it's,
I think it would be fair, Paul, really to say, not to interrupt you, but that it was good engineering practice more than 100 years ago on the railroads that has been subsequently enshrined into FRA regulation for the railroads. And it remains good engineering practice for transit rail, but the FTA, playing a different role historically than the FRA, has not promulgated rules with anywhere near the specificity that exists in the FRA environment.
Yeah, let me jump in here too, because I don't want everybody to go sideways on this. Vitality is a very touchy subject in the railway signaling world, because it has as much to do about reliability as it is level of safety, right? And sometimes we use the term safety integrity level, right? And so, from a European standpoint or international standpoint, vital means usually SIL level 4. It's a certain level of safety, but also reliability, so that the probability is less than a fraction of a percent that you would ever have something happen that would result in a bad situation, like Paul said, an unsafe situation. And so it's a very complex topic, and there's a lot of arguments about what it means and what standard you'd use to achieve it. Older systems, right? Typically, what you were trying to achieve was primarily authority. You don't want two trains occupying the same track at the same time. That was, that was always the goal. And with the signal, that helped. But then, if they're not paying attention, as we've seen even today, you go past the signal, it's not, there's only so much you can do. You have human error. So older systems, especially, the idea was that they would always fail in a safe way, and that you would always have a scenario where you did not, to a high degree of probability, get yourself into an unsafe situation. And so automatic train control especially was intended to be that way. So if you lost your signal, for example, your brakes would apply. And so there's certain fail safes that were put into place. And today, even today for FRA at PTC, things of that nature, we only require, or they only require vital systems for higher speed, high risk operations, just because it's a difficult task, and to try to achieve that on thousands of miles of track. And so if you have one or two trains a day or a handful of trains a day that are basically coal, not the same level of severity of moving passengers on the Northeast Corridor at 150 miles an hour, for example, right? So there are different terms that we throw out there. Historical systems like this, they have vitality built into them, but as we just discussed, it depends on what their purpose is and how you use them. And so many of the older systems, they don't have the capability of what we have today, so they still relied on the engineer or the operator following the rules. And they were really just there as a backup, primarily, again, for authority. It wasn't really there to enforce speed necessarily. You can use it that way, right? But you have to do it very particularly. So that's why I think more discussion on this is necessary before we jump.
And definitely more discussion it could be helpful for evaluating every aspect of the system. However, when it comes specifically to ATS, it is not designed to fail safe. In fact, when it fails, the default is an increased speed rather than a decreased speed. And so it is a non-vital system, as was shown in the Shady Grove accident in 1996. And so we have ensured that Metro keeps the focus on there are safe and proper ways to use ATS, and there are inappropriate ways to rely on it as if it were fail-safe. And since it is not, we are unless and until it's upgraded, we will be very careful in our review of how Metro Rail intends to rely on ATS performance levels in an ATO world.
No, you're right. ATP is your backbone of safety. That's what's providing your level of safety. And even there, you have to know what you're intending to do with it. You're right. Supervisory systems are just that. They're just intended to give you a second level of control, primarily if you want to put operational restrictions in place or do something that's not a safety, critical safety action. So you're right. You have to be careful with what you're using and what the intended purpose is.
Okay, thank you. That just warns me I should be careful what I ask for because I might get it. So thank you for that.
I think I'm owed a continuing education unit from this discussion.
Okay, having said that, are there any more questions from any of the commissioners for Mr. Smith? Okay, thank you. In that case, we will now move on to safety event investigations. We will hear presentations on all of the reports and then consider a single motion to whether to approve or disapprove. If any commissioner wishes to remove a report from the group that we will consider in a single vote, please indicate that at the end of the presentation on the report. So the first report will be Mr. Quigley. Adam?
Thank you, Chair Hart. For your consideration and adoption today, we have a roadway worker protection related safety event, 2 improper door operation safety events, and 2 unauthorized use of automatic train operation mode, one of which led to a station overrun event. Investigation Whiskey 0345 relates to an improper roadway worker protection event that occurred on March 21st, 2024. At approximately 10:20 a.m., an automatic train control roadway worker in charge contacted the radio rail traffic controller at the Metro Integrated Command and Communication Center to request permission to enter the roadway at Deanwood Station. The RIC and their crew were tasked with conducting a shunt verification between chain markers Delta 2 339 plus 00 and Delta 2 420 plus 00. That is on track number 2. At 10:31 a.m., the controller granted permission for the roadway worker in charge and their crew to proceed with their work, advising them to notify once they safely reached the platform at Deanwood Station. After completing initial tasks, the RIC requested foul time protection at 11:09 a.m. to continue the shunt verification. At this point, the controller instructed the RIC to contact the advanced mobile flagger standing by at Chevrolet Station, and once confirmation was received, permission was granted to proceed under AMF protection. At 11:19 a.m., the RIC relinquished their foul time and requested to continue work under AMF protection. The controller, realizing that proper foul time protection had not been established, asked the RIC if they had already entered the roadway platform limits area. The RIC confirmed that they had. The controller immediately instructed the crew to stand clear of the roadway and contacted the assistant operations manager to report the improper roadway worker protection event. The preliminary investigation into the event shortly after occurred determined that the RIC had requested foul time and was granted permission by the rail traffic controller to continue their work. The controller understood the request to be for AMF protection, not foul time, therefore failed to implement the safeguards required for foul time. This communication could have led to severe consequences, including the possibility of a rail vehicle collision. During the investigation, the controller claimed that poor radio transmission clarity and high communication volume may have played a role. Through a review of the audio data did not support these claims. Both the RIC and the controller were re-instructed on RWP procedures, and the controller received refresher training specifically focusing on the proper approval and implementation of roadway protection measures. This incident serves as a critical reminder of the importance of following established protocols and maintaining clear, effective communication at all times. While no injuries or damages resulted from this event, it could have resulted far more serious consequences. Thank you. This completes this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Quigley. Do any of the commissioners have any questions on this event?
I'm not seeing any hands, sir.
Okay, in that case, Ms. Keyroads, would you please present the next reports?
Thank you, Chair Hart. Investigations Whiskey 0346 and Whiskey 0347 relate to improper door events that occurred in February and March of this year. Direct causes of improper door operations can include human factors, such as pressing a button to open the doors on the wrong side or mechanical defects. Investigation Whiskey 0346 relates to an improper door event that occurred on February 26, 2024. A student train operator operating train ID 910 on the Orange Line reported to the rail traffic controller that they had mistakenly opened the train doors on the non-platform side while stopped at Farragut West Station. The controller immediately instructed the student train operator to offload passengers and ensure the train was clear. A ground walk-around inspection was conducted by the student train operator, the line platform instructor, and a rail supervisor dispatched to the scene. In line with established safety protocols, both the student train operator and the LPI were relieved from duty for post-incident toxicology testing. The train itself was removed from revenue service for further inspection, which confirmed that the train operated as commanded by the operator. The primary cause of this improper door operation was distraction. At the time of the incident, the LPI had left their observation seat to respond to a request from a second student train operator to use the restroom. This interaction caused a lapse in situational awareness for both the LPI and the operating student train operator. The operating student did not realize they had opened the doors on the wrong side of the train until about 5 seconds later, when they promptly closed the doors. This incident highlights several key factors, including the distraction caused by a lack of supervisory oversight and the importance of maintaining focus during critical operations. Both the LPI and the student train operator have received additional training to prevent similar occurrences in the future. No injuries or damage were reported. However, this event serves as a reminder of the importance of vigilance and proper supervision in maintaining safety. Investigation Whiskey 0347 relates to a March 12th event at Vienna Station. Orange Line train 914 arrived at Vienna Station, where the train operator opened the doors without properly berthing the train. As a result, one of the doors on the last car was positioned outside the platform limits. The train operator then keyed down and exited the train to reverse ends, unaware of the error. It was a second train operator located in the trailing car who noticed the issue and notified the terminal supervisor. Upon verification, the terminal supervisor boarded the train, closed the doors, and reported the improper door operation to the Metro Integrated Command and Communications Center. A ground walk-around inspection was conducted to ensure no passengers had fallen onto the roadway. The inspection confirmed the area was clear and no injuries or damage resulted from this event. The investigation revealed that the train operator failed to perform door operations in accordance with standard procedures. Although the train operator looked out the cab window twice, they did not properly assess that the last car was not fully berthed within the platform limits before opening the doors. The train was subsequently removed from service for post-incident inspection, which confirmed the train operated as commanded by the train operator. Thank you. That completes his presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Quiroz. Excuse me. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners on these events?
Yes, Commissioner Conklin has his hand raised.
Yes, please, Commissioner Conklin.
Thanks for that. So it appears that the proper procedures were followed once the incident occurred and there were no injuries or other serious outcomes from these. But I'm also curious to the extent that the automatic door operation kind of eliminates the potential for these events or not. And, you know, it seems like getting 100% attention and compliance for the operators, if they have to manually operate the doors, it seems like there will always be some incidents of this, but a key is that the proper procedures after the event were followed to ensure that there was no injury or other bad outcome from them. So I was just curious if you could comment on those issues. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's right. They are encouraged, operators are encouraged to report to the control center when they have a safety event. Not reporting it actually results in, much worse consequences for them. But we do see the numbers actually you could look at the same time period of last year compared to this year when automatic door operation was implemented, which these two incidents was before it was implemented for the entire system. From July 8th to October 1st, there were 6 improper door operations last year. And this year, in that same time period, there's been 5. And we see the reason for a lot of the improper door operations, even though there are the automatic door operations is system-wide right now is because there are some stations that automatic doors don't work. So if there is a problem, then the operator has to operate the doors manually, and sometimes they get flustered and they get nervous, and that's when the mistakes happen. But we have seen almost every single time they do report it, and they follow procedures for checking the area and make sure it's clear.
That's good. And then I was just curious about this need to inspect the train. It seems like maybe overkill given the nature of the event, but what's the basis for having that train inspection requirement?
Right. So there have been incidents where there's been a button stuck or some type of mechanical defect that has caused the train doors to open on the wrong side. So that's why they check, just to make sure there wasn't anything that the train contributed to that event.
Thanks for that explanation.
Sure.
Thank you. Any further questions for Ms. Key Rose?
I'm not seeing any other hands.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Silva. In that case, Mr. Quigley, please present the next reports.
Thank you, Chair Hart. Whiskey 348-0348 occurred on Friday, March 17th, 2023, involving train ID 614 on the Silver Line. This event highlights the unauthorized use of automatic train operation, or ATO mode, which led to a station overrun at Innovation Center Station. The train operator overran Innovation Center Station by 1.5 cars while operating in ATO mode. The train did not service the station, and passengers were offloaded at the next station stop, Harrington Station. No injuries or damage were reported during this event. The investigation revealed that the train operator had intentionally switched to ATO mode just outside Loudon Gateway Station. The train remained in ATO until it lost speed commands near Dulles Station. The operator then switched to manual mode to service Dulles Station. However, after departing Dulles, the operator placed the train back into ATO, which ultimately led to the overrun at Innovation Center. Further investigation showed that this was not an isolated incident. Data from earlier in the day revealed that the same train operator had engaged ATO multiple times during a previous trip. The operator also admitted to eating while operating the train, which is against Metrorail rules. One of the key contributing factors to the station overrun was the train's failure to detect the programmed station stop signal before entering the platform at Innovation Center. This signal would have ensured that the train berthed properly within platform limits. Compounding this issue was the rail traffic controller's failure to monitor the Automatic Information Display System, or AIMS, which detects when a train is operating in an improper mode, such as ATO. While the AIM system should have flagged the issue, it was not being actively monitored, underscoring the need for more vigilance on the part of the rail traffic controllers. The train operator was removed from service following the incident and was subject to post-incident testing. It is important to note that the use of ATO on Metrorail is currently unauthorized, and the operator's actions were a clear violation of safety protocols. This incident, along with others, demonstrates that the need for comprehensive training for all Metrorail personnel, including train operators and rail traffic controllers, to ensure they fully understand the system they work with, especially as Metrorail prepares for the future introduction of ATO. The event described in Whiskey 0349 came to light during an investigation conducted by the Enterprise Application Technical Lead, who was looking into an unrelated event at the K&N connector where the Orange Line and Silver Line meet. During that investigation, it was discovered that train ID 711, which had departed Huntington Station in non-revenue service, was operating in ATO mode. This violated Metrorail's operating procedures, which prohibits the use of ATO without authorization. After this discovery, the Assistant Director of the Metrorail Integrated Command and Communication Center launched an investigation. It was quickly determined that the same train operator had used ATO on 4 previous occasions, including the day before on March 27, 2024. Further investigation conducted by the Office of Safety Investigations identified 3 additional dates where the operator had engaged ATO while departing from Huntington Station. During an investigation interview, the train operator admitted to using ATO out of curiosity. Instead of following proper procedures, the operator manually engaged the ATO system multiple times, despite knowing that ATO is not authorized under current operating conditions. Following this discovery, the train operator was removed from service post-incident toxicology testing. The train itself was also removed from service and inspected. It was confirmed that the train operated according to the commands given by the operator, who had manually pressed the ATO start button. In response to this incident, several corrective actions were taken to prevent future occurrences. Metrorail reissued an operations personnel notice to reinforce the prohibition of on using ATO. Additionally, a memorandum was sent to the Metro Integrated Command and Communication staff, reminding them to monitor ATO usage closely. The train operator involved in the incident also completed a refresher course to ensure they fully understand and comply with all operating protocols. The root cause of this event was the train operator's disregard for established policy. Thank you. That completes today's presentations.
Thank you, Mr. Quigley. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Mr. Quigley?
Commissioner Rouse has raised his hand.
Commissioner Rouse, please.
Yes, thanks. Mr. Quigley, on the report for 0348, I think it was, you mentioned, it said data was found that they had operated an ATO in other sections that day of their operation. Do you know where they're getting that data from?
Yeah, the SCADA system, the AIM system, it's called an Oracle report. So basically, the controller's software, dispatching software, documents everything. So when a train switches to ATO, it documents it, the time and date and time, and when the doors are open, it documents it. So there's a system within the dispatching software that records everything. When you go through signals, when you cancel signals, everything you can think of.
Okay, so as long as I'm guessing it rewrites itself after a period of time, but as long as you capture it or take that data at some point, it's there for at least so many days.
Months.
Okay. So it is feasible for them to potentially do some level of investigation to how often this is happening with different crew members.
Yes.
And whether or not there's an issue here beyond just a couple bad actors, if you will, if you want to call them that, or just people that are taking advantage or curious with the system. Well, my main concern with 0348 is the fact that in the case of the system not operating properly, it's because other decisions have been made by other departments to reuse components or whereas the system is supposed to operate one way, the operator would never know that if that track circuit wasn't complete or one of the components that's supposed to be there was taken because it was used somewhere else in the line. There's that real potential for them to think it's working properly. Even we know they're not supposed to be operating in this mode, but if they're presuming, what's the harm? There is a very real harm if it's not set up completely, if we haven't gone through the full commissioning process and they're not maintaining the system for ATO operation. So there is a little bit of concern there that we see this, and it would be interesting to know, is this a systemic issue? Is just a couple, how often do we see this? If we can pull it, if it's reasonable to pull that and query the data, I don't know. We've got a lot of things on our plate, but it is seeing that issue, that risk, because of unrelated activities, if you will. Track maintenance and signal doing something, operators just, operating it because they know it's there. Do we have something, a potential, hazard there that needs to be mitigated in some other way? And if so, if we've seen this before, what's the typical recourse for these operators if they're caught operating in ATO against the operating rules? Is it just retraining and they're back in the system, or is there you get a limit and then you're decertified or whatever and you're no longer operating trains? Do you have any insight into that?
Yeah, I think it's a case by case is probably my best response for that. I know the operator for 0348 up on the Silver Line is no longer with Metrorail, so their employment was ended after this. I can't say the same for the operator in 0349, so it looks like it's kind of case by case situation that Metro addresses this.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just wondering if it's sinking down to them that there is a real risk here unless the system was properly set up and qualified to go into that level of operations, that they could be putting themselves into a situation that they shouldn't be, and that's why the rule's in place. They may feel like it's a harmless activity, but it really could have a consequence if they don't understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point.
Chair.
Any further questions?
Yes, I'm sorry. Commissioner Farrar Dyke also has her hand raised.
Yes, Commissioner Farrar Dyke, please.
You mentioned that the data is available, but are they reviewing it on a daily basis? Meaning, is there like a report on the status of a driver each day so that you would be able to pull at the end of the day to see if they checked all the boxes, if they did something that they weren't supposed to, versus you coming back like after a month to realize that somebody had been doing something on a daily basis.
Right.
Seems like there should be kind of almost like a daily report card, where you could follow up, not when you had a crisis or something actually happened, and now you're pulling up all of the things that they should have been doing all along when you have that information right there, and someone could be checking it on a daily basis to follow up.
No, absolutely. And that is something that I honestly left out. So that we should definitely give Metro credit. After the incident on the Silver Line, they call it, I guess it's, I forget the department, but basically like Rock IT, they started generating daily reports to see if they would find any ATO training. Basically just run a report and it would show how many or, what trains activated ATO. So they did continue that, and they still monitor that, to this day.
Well, thank you for bringing that up, because that's positive right there.
Yeah, no, thank you for asking that question. Yeah, absolutely.
Chair, Commissioner Conklin has his hand raised.
Yes, Commissioner Conklin, please.
I was actually surprised by these two reports because I had, in my little brain, assumed that if ATO wasn't permitted for use, it wouldn't be available for use. So I assume that based on these incidents, there's no way to actually disable that functionality on segments of the lines where it's not in testing or outside of testing periods. That there must not be, otherwise I would assume it would have been disabled.
Right. I don't believe so.
But now it sounds like the daily monitoring of what's happening, what the operators are up to would bring that out if it occurred.
Yes.
Is that a statement? Thank you for that question, Commissioner Farrar Dyke. Much appreciated. Are there any further questions for Mr. Quigley? I'm just curious, you made reference to a PSS signal. What is that signal? What is it? What is its function?
It basically tells the train that there's a station ahead that it needs to stop for. And operators are supposed to monitor their console to make sure that they see that PSS light up on their console, which tells them that the train did recognize that there is a station ahead and that it's going to stop. If they don't see the PSS illuminate on their console, they are to get out of ATO and basically stop the train and pull in manually and service the station. So it's basically a little signal, wayside communication to the train that lets them know, hey, you have a train coming, a station ahead, you need to start slowing down or preparing to stop.
But if it doesn't operate, then and ATO is being used, which of course it's not supposed to be, but ATO wouldn't perceive the existence of a station ahead, I take it. Is that what happens?
Right. So
Okay.
the operator didn't recognize that the PSS didn't illuminate and that the train wasn't servicing or going to stop. And then that's why the operator had to go into emergency braking once the train started to pass the station.
I see. Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions from any of the commissioners for Mr. Quigley?
I see no other hands.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Silbaugh. In that case, I'm going to seek motion to adopt the investigation reports. Is there a motion to adopt the investigation reports that have just been presented? Whiskey 0345, 0346, 0347, 0348, and 0349. Is there a motion to adopt all of the investigation reports?
So moved.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Commissioner Conklin. And the second?
I second.
Okay, Commissioner Farrar Dyke, thank you for that. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say yay. Yay.
Yay.
Any opposed, please raise your hand and say nay.
Okay, so the vote is 4 yeas and 0 nays. The motion to adopt the investigation reports passes. Sorry, the investigation reports as they were presented passes.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Silbaugh. Next item on the agenda, resolutions and other items. The next item is, in particular, is the draft fiscal year 2026 budget and work program. So Secretary Treasurer Farrar Dyke, please take the floor.
Thank you, Chair Hart. The Finance Committee has reviewed this draft budget and work program and recommends the Commissioners approve transmitting this draft to the funding jurisdictions in accordance with the WMSC's Master Funding Agreement. Mr. Angie, could you provide a brief summary?
Thank you, Secretary Treasurer Farrar Dyke. This draft budget and work program covers the fiscal year that starts July 1, 2025. It considers the WMSC's workload and responsibilities and the available funding. The draft budget projects that 40% of our program will be supported by federal funds in fiscal year 2026. We continue to follow our 5-year spending plan for each federal grant. In total, the federal budget is just over $8 million. As Secretary Treasurer Farrar Dyke noted, the Finance Committee recommended approving the transmission of this draft budget and work program. With Commissioner approval today, we will transmit this to the jurisdictions for use in their budget planning process by the end of this month, ahead of the deadline in the Master Funding Agreement. This draft assists the jurisdictions in their budget process and ensures that our team is prepared to most effectively continue to build on the work we are conducting day in and day out. Thank you.
Thank you for that report. And just for clarification, again, this is a vote for transmittal, not a vote of approval of the budget.
Correct.
Is there a motion to adopt resolution R 2024-07 approving transmission of the fiscal year 2026 draft budget and work program?
I'll move. So moved.
Okay, there's a motion. The second, the motion.
I'll second.
Second, Treasurer Farrar Dyke. Thank you. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say yay. Yay.
Yay.
Any opposed, please raise your hand and say nay.
So Chair, the vote again is 4 yeas to 0 nays. Therefore, the motion to adopt the resolution passes that approves the WMSC draft for the 2026 budget and work program to be transmitted to the jurisdictions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Silbaugh. Today, we are considering an interim revision to the WMSC program standard. The program standard is the governing document that sets out requirements and deadlines for Metro Rail and expectations from the WMSC. In accordance with our responsibilities under the WMSC Compact, the process set out in our program standard and federal regulations, we update the program standard at least once a year as part of our continuous improvement process. We also have the ability to enact interim revisions when needed. The interim change today is necessary to meet the requirements of the FTA mandated risk-based inspection component of the WMSC inspections program. Dr. Meyer, do you have anything else to add to that description?
Yes, thank you, Chair Hart. The compact lays out our authority and our responsibilities, and the program standard helps us put those into practice. As part of our continuous improvement process, we consider program standard improvements as we conduct our work throughout the year. The program standard comes to commissioners for review at least once each calendar year. But today's interim revision is needed to incorporate the Federal Transit Administration approved risk-based inspections aspects into our already existing inspections program. The WMSC has been conducting inspections as part, on the WMATA rail system as part of our oversight program since 2019. But because of the unique nature of this program standard update in that it originated from a Federal Transit Administration special directive 22-50, WMATA received several opportunities to provide feedback on the latest updates, and there were meetings between WMATA and the WMSC throughout the process. And WMATA had 2 comment periods. The first was in April prior to the initial submission to the FTA, and again this month. After meetings with WMATA and receiving WMATA's comments, the WMSC carefully reviewed that feedback in light of our role, the compact, and relevant regulations. And where appropriate, changes were incorporated to the draft before you now. Each of WMATA's comments will receive a formal written response. I also note that we appreciate the Federal Transit Administration's support and guidance throughout the risk-based inspections review process, and we appreciate FTA's approval of our new inspections program and look forward to implementing it. Other than that, to urge the commissioners to adopt this revision of the program standard, I have nothing further.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Dr. Meyer?
Commissioner Conklin has raised his hand.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes, Commissioner Conklin.
I just wanted to be clear that it looked like the revisions to the program standard were limited in this effort just to incorporate those requirements for the risk-based inspection. So it didn't, when I reviewed the document, it didn't look like there were wholesale adjustments to what's in there, but the changes were limited to certain sections where those new requirements were added. I just wanted, if you could confirm that I have a correct interpretation of what the revision is for.
Yes, that is a correct interpretation.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from any of the commissioners?
I see no other hands, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Silva. Is there, in that case, is there a motion to adopt Resolution R 2024-08, adopting Program Standard Revision 7? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay, so move Commissioner Rouse. And is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Conklin, second. Thank you for that. With a motion and a second, all those in favor, please raise your hand and say yay. Yay.
Yay.
Nay.
Any opposed, please raise your hand and say nay.
So Chair, the vote again is 4 yeas to 0 nays. So the motion to adopt Resolution R 2024-08 that adopts the interim changes to the interim update to the program standard, which will now be version 7.1 passes. This new version will be effective as of November 15th of 2024.
Thank you, Ms. Silva. Is there any other business that the commissioners would like to address today? Hearing none, that completes our meeting for today. As a reminder, you can always report any safety concerns through our website, wmsc.gov, through our social media channels, or by email. I would like to thank Dr. Meyer and his staff for their hard work to continuously improve the safety of Metro Rail, and I would like to thank them for their presentations for this meeting. I'd also like to thank the commissioners for their intense engagement in the process in general and in this meeting today. Finally, I would like to thank the members of the public who attended this meeting. We appreciate your joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next time. The next time is, we expect to hold our next public meeting on December 10th, 2024. Is there any further business? Hearing no further business, that completes our meeting for today, and it is here